Lately, there's been this unsettling feeling gnawing at me, a sense that something's shifting. In my relationship with Michelle. She's not just my girlfriend. She's the choreographer of our team, the one who designs every move, every transition, every breath in our routines. She's the glue that holds us together, and I've always been her right hand, her first assistant, her most loyal supporter, and, I thought, the person she trusted the most. But recently, I've felt a distance growing between us. Subtle, nothing I can put my finger on, but it's there. A new light in her eyes when she's with certain people, a laugh that sounds just a bit more genuine when I'm not the one making her smile. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm just reading too much into things. But I can't shake the feeling that I might be losing her, that maybe her heart is being pulled in another direction. I try to ignore it, focus on the team. After all, we're only a month away from the biggest performance of our careers, and everyone's counting on me to keep things moving. But this feeling won't go away, and I keep finding myself questioning what, if anything, has changed between us. And the truth is, these doubts started that night at the bar. The night everything changed. Our crew wasn't just a team, it was a family. We'd built something real, something special. Late nights, long rehearsals, injuries, frustrations, and breakthroughs had bonded us in ways that outsiders couldn't understand. And at the center of it all was Michelle, our choreographer. She was the visionary behind every routine, the one who pushed us to reach for something greater. Her passion for dance was electric, infectious, and it brought out the best in all of us. My role was more than just being her boyfriend. As her first assistant, I helped her lead the team, kept morale up, and made sure everyone stayed focused. We were a mix of personalities, each bringing something unique to the crew. Brandon was our joker, always bringing laughs and lightening the mood when things got too intense. He was quick with a joke, a playful move, or a prank, and even Michelle couldn't resist laughing at his antics. Then there was Joseph, our level-headed strategist, who could step back and analyze a routine with an objective eye. Michelle often relied on him for advice, and he was a grounding force whenever the pressure got too high. Christian was the heart of the team, the one who brought emotional depth to our performances. He danced with a raw vulnerability that made each routine feel like a story, and his open-hearted nature made him the one we all turned to when we needed support. And then there was Hero, mysterious, intense, and incredibly talented. He didn't say much, but his presence was powerful. His movements were sharp, precise, almost hypnotic, and Michelle had a particular respect for him. There was an unspoken connection between them, built on mutual admiration and trust. That night, after weeks of grueling rehearsals, Michelle suggested we all go out to celebrate. We were exhausted, but with only a month left until the big performance, we all needed a break. The bar was lively, filled with music and laughter, a much-needed escape from the pressure cooker of rehearsals. Michelle was radiant, her energy lighting up the room as she laughed and talked with each of us. Watching her interact with her team, it was easy to see why everyone admired her. She had this natural charisma, a way of making each person feel seen and valued. I couldn't help but feel proud, watching her be the leader we all looked up to. At some point in the evening, I went to grab another round of drinks for the group. When I returned, I noticed Michelle talking with Hero. She was leaning in, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they spoke. Hero was usually so reserved, but with her he looked softer, more open. There was a warmth in his eyes as he listened to her, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something, jealousy maybe, or doubt, but I brushed it off. Michelle was just being her usual self, connecting with each of us, making sure we felt supported. And Hero had always been respectful, focused, serious. I had no reason to worry. The night wore on, and we were all in high spirits, laughing, sharing stories, letting ourselves be just a group of friends for a change instead of a team under constant pressure. Around midnight, Hero got up, saying he needed to use the restroom. He walked toward the back staircase that led down to the bathrooms on the lower level. What happened next is something I'll never forget. A few moments after Hero disappeared toward the back, there was a loud, sickening thud that cut through the noise in the bar. Everyone fell silent, and a second later we heard a muffled groan of pain. My heart dropped, and I immediately ran toward the sound, with Michelle and the rest of the team clothes behind me. At the bottom of the staircase, Hero was lying on the floor, his face contorted in agony. His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and he clutched it tightly, his jaw clenched against the pain. The sight of him, the strongest, most disciplined dancer on our team, lying there, vulnerable and hurt, sent a chill through all of us. "Hero!" Michelle gasped, dropping to her knees beside him. "Oh my God, are you okay?" He managed to shake his head, his voice barely a whisper. I think it's broken." The rest of the team gathered around, faces pale, whispering in shock. Brandon ran to call an ambulance, while Joseph tried to keep everyone calm. But there was a tension in the air, a shared realization of how serious this could be. Michelle held Hero's hand, her expression a mix of shock and determination as she whispered words of comfort to him. She looked heartbroken, and I knew why. Hero wasn't just any dancer, he was one of our best. Losing him this close to our big performance was unimaginable. The ambulance arrived, and as they lifted him onto the stretcher, Michelle stayed by his side, refusing to leave him until they closed the ambulance doors. The rest of us stood there, watching the ambulance pull away, the gravity of the situation sinking in. With only a month left until the performance, Hero's injury was a devastating blow. The next day, we all gathered at the hospital, anxiously waiting for news about Hero's condition. Michelle was pale, her hands fidgeting as she paced back and forth, and I could see the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This performance was her vision, her creation, and Hero was an essential part of it. Finally, the doctor emerged, his expression serious. "Hero's leg is fractured in several places," he said. "He's going to need surgery, followed by a long period of rehabilitation. Realistically, it'll be a year, maybe longer, before he'll be able to dance again." Michelle's face fell, her shoulders sagging as the reality of the situation set in. A year. Hero would be out for at least a year. The rest of the team looked equally devastated. Hero was irreplaceable, and with only a month left, it felt impossible to even think about finding someone new. "We'll have to rework everything," Michelle said quietly, her voice trembling but resolute. "We'll have to find a new dancer, redo the routines, and somehow make it work." It was a daunting task, but I could see the determination in her eyes. Despite the devastation, Michelle was a fighter, and I knew she wouldn't give up on this performance, not after all the work we'd put into it. As we left the hospital that day, I felt the weight of the challenge ahead of us. We'd lost Hero, and now, with the clock ticking, we'd need to find someone who could not only match his skill, but also fit seamlessly into our crew. I glanced at Michelle, and in that moment, I saw the strain, the worry in her expression. But beneath it, there was something else, a spark of determination that I recognized well. She was ready to do whatever it took to make this work. And as her partner, I was ready to stand by her side, no matter how impossible the road ahead seemed. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the changes that were coming, for all of us. The atmosphere in the rehearsal hall was tense. The team had gathered together, their faces a mix of exhaustion and unease. Hero's injury had left a gaping hole in their lineup, and, with only a month until their biggest performance yet, the pressure was mounting. They needed someone who could step into Hero's place seamlessly, someone skilled enough to keep up with the intense choreography and strong enough to hold their own alongside the rest of the team. Michelle, as always, had taken charge. She stood at the front of the room, clipboard in hand, her expression both focused and determined. Her role as the team's choreographer made this her responsibility. She was the one who had to find a dancer who could bring her vision to life even without Hero. But Justin could see the strain in her eyes. This wasn't just any show, this was the performance they'd been working toward for months, the one that would define them as a crew. Losing Hero had been a blow, but Michelle wasn't about to let that stop them. This is our chance to find someone who can help us make this show a success, she told them, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. I know it's hard with Hero out, but he'd want us to keep pushing forward. He'd want us to give this everything we've got. Justin nodded, crossing his arms as he leaned against the wall. Yeah, you're right, he said, though there was a shadow of doubt in his voice. But finding someone on Hero's level? That's a tall order. Brandon, always the optimist, grinned and shrugged. Come on, guys. Who knows? Maybe there's someone out there with superhuman dance powers just waiting for their big break. Let's keep the faith, all right? Christian, ever the calm voice of reason, nodded in agreement. It's not going to be easy, but we're in this together. Michelle, we've got your back. We'll find the right person. Michelle offered them a small, grateful smile. Their support was everything to her, and she knew they were all feeling the weight of the situation just as much as she was. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but steady. All right, let's get started. We need to see everyone and find the one who can bring our routine to life. The candidates began to trickle in, one by one, each of them eager to prove they had what it took to join the team. But as the dancers performed, it became clear just how difficult this task would be. The first dancer executed his routine with enthusiasm, but his movements lacked the sharpness and control they needed. Michelle watched intently, her brow furrowing as she took notes, but it was obvious from her expression that he wasn't right for them. Justin exchanged a quick look with Joseph, who gave a slight shake of his head. This wasn't their guy. The next few candidates showed similar results. Some had passion but lacked technique. Others had skill but couldn't match the intensity that the team required. As the hours passed, an unspoken frustration began to settle over the room. Justin could see it in Michelle's expression, the way her shoulders tensed and her lips pressed together more tightly with each new dancer who didn't meet their standards. Finally, just as they were beginning to lose hope, a young man stepped into the room with a confidence that instantly caught everyone's attention. He was tall and athletic, with an air of calm self-assurance that made the rest of the candidates seem almost hesitant in comparison. He introduced himself as Leo, his voice clear and steady. I heard you're looking for a dancer to fill in, he said, glancing around the room before letting his gaze settle on Michelle. If you give me a chance, I think I can show you what you're looking for. Michelle's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a spark of interest there that hadn't been present for the other dancers. She gestured for him to take the floor, her gaze sharp, evaluating. All right, Leo, show us what you've got. As Leo began to dance, the entire room seemed to shift. His movements were precise, controlled, but there was an intensity to his style that was impossible to ignore. Each step was filled with a raw energy that made him stand out, his body flowing effortlessly through the routine. He wasn't just dancing. He was commanding the space, drawing everyone's eyes to him. Justin watched, feeling a strange mixture of relief and wariness. Leo was good, very good. He moved with a confidence that was rare, especially for someone trying to join a team at the last minute. And as Justin glanced at Michelle, He saw the way her eyes were locked onto Leo, a look of almost fascination in her expression. When Leo finished, he stood there, breathing heavily but looking completely in control. Slight smile playing on his lips as he waited for their reaction. The room was silent for a moment, everyone absorbing the impact of his performance. Brandon was the first to break the silence, his voice filled with excitement. "Damn, this guy's got some serious moves. Look at the way he handles himself. I think we found our man." Christian nodded, his voice thoughtful. "Yeah, he's got the skills, but it's more than that. He's got presence. It's like he already belongs here." Michelle's gaze remained fixed on Leo, her expression a mix of admiration and something deeper, something that Justin couldn't quite place. He'd seen her passionate about dance before, but this was different. Her focus on Leo was intense, almost hungry, like she'd found something she hadn't realized she'd been looking for. "Leo," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of excitement that Justin recognized. Immediately, "If you're willing to take on the challenge, we'd love to have you. It won't be easy. We're only a month out from the show, and there's a lot you'll need to learn. But if you're up for it, I believe you can do it." Leo's smile widened, his confidence clear. "I'm all in," he said. "Give me the choreography, and I'll make sure I'm ready. I won't let you down." Justin stepped forward, extending a hand to Leo, trying to push down the strange feeling growing in his chest. "Welcome to the team, man," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "We've got a lot of work ahead. But with you on board, I think we might actually pull this off." As the rest of the team gathered around to welcome Leo, Justin couldn't help but glance back at Michelle. She was watching Leo with a focus he hadn't seen in a while, her eyes bright, her expression almost inspired. He told himself it was just the relief of finding someone who could step in at the last moment, someone who could save the show. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the way she was looking at Leo, a spark he hadn't seen in a long time. And though he tried to ignore it, that flicker of doubt, the one that had been nagging at him since Hero's accident, began to grow just a little stronger. The weeks leading up to the show were some of the most intense the team had ever experienced. Replacing Hero was no small feat, and even though Leo had stepped in with a confidence and energy that inspired everyone, the pressure was still immense. Every rehearsal was a marathon, with Michelle pushing the team harder and harder, her vision driving each of them to the edge of their limits. Leo was a quick learner, almost too quick, Justin thought at times. He picked up moves with an ease that surprised them all, mastering complex steps and intricate transitions in a fraction of the time they'd expected. But even with his natural talent, he was still playing catch up. The choreography had been crafted over months with Hero in mind, and it required a level of finesse and understanding that took time to build. Because of this, Michelle and Leo often stayed late after the regular practices. "He just needs a little extra time to get everything down," Michelle had explained, almost casually. But Justin couldn't help noticing how often the two of them ended up alone together in the studio, going over the same moves again and again. She said it was all about getting Leo ready for the show, making sure he could fit seamlessly into the routine. But the more it happened, the harder it was for Justin to ignore the sinking feeling in his stomach. One night, after another long day of practice, Justin noticed Michelle's phone on the bench beside her bag. She'd stepped away to speak with one of the lighting techs, and in a moment of impulse, one he told himself was simply out of curiosity, out of concern for the team, he picked it up. A string of messages from Leo was open on the screen. As he scrolled through them, his heart began to pound. "Thanks again for the extra session tonight, Michelle. I'd be lost without your guidance. You know, you really have an incredible body. I don't think I've ever worked with a choreographer who moves the way you do." Justin's eyes narrowed as he read the words, a knot of anger tightening in his chest. Leo wasn't just thanking her for the help, he was flirting with her, and he wasn't being subtle about it. Justin felt his grip tighten on the phone as he read the next message. I have to admit, Justin's a lucky guy. I'd give anything to be in his place, getting to touch those perfect curves every day. The words hit him like a punch. Perfect curves. Leo wasn't just admiring Michelle's talent, he was talking about her body, the way she moved, the way her figure held the attention of everyone in the room. Michelle had always been graceful, her body sculpted. From years of dance, she was strong yet delicate, with toned muscles that flowed into smooth curves and an elegance that made every movement seem effortless. Her long legs, her graceful arms, the subtle arch of her back. She had a presence that commanded attention on stage, a beauty that was undeniable. But seeing Leo describe her like this, in such a raw and suggestive way, made Justin's blood boil. And as he read the next message, the anger only grew. Honestly, it's hard not to be jealous of you too. You've got something so special. I can only imagine what it's like to be that close to her. To feel those curves pressed up against you. Justin could feel the heat rising to his face, a mixture of anger and humiliation flooding his chest. He'd always trusted Michelle, always believed in her commitment to him, to the team. But here was Leo, talking about her in a way that went far beyond professional admiration. And the fact that Michelle hadn't put a stop to it, hadn't drawn a line, it made Justin's doubts flare into something darker, something he couldn't ignore. She came back then, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. Justin quickly put the phone down, his face a mask as he tried to keep his emotions in check. But it wasn't easy. Every time he looked at her, he saw the messages in his mind, Leo's words replaying over and over. That night, as he watched Michelle and Leo finish up another late practice, he couldn't shake the image of Leo's eyes lingering on her, the way his gaze followed the curves of her body. As they moved through the choreography together, Michelle was focused, her expression all business, but Leo's admiration was almost palpable. Justin told himself it was just Leo's ego, his flirtatious nature, but the doubts wouldn't go away. And deep down, he knew this was more than just jealousy. Something was changing, and for the first time, Justin felt like he was losing his grip on Michelle, on the team, on everything he'd worked so hard to build. The day of the performance had finally arrived, and the air was thick with tension and anticipation. The team had spent countless hours rehearsing, refining every move, every beat. This was their moment, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Winning this competition meant everything. They were staying in a nearby hotel, and the morning was a flurry of last-minute preparations. Bags and costumes were strewn around the rooms as everyone rushed to get ready. Justin had finished packing and was waiting in the hotel lobby with the rest of the team. Leo, however, was nowhere to be seen. Anyone seen Leo? Justin asked, glancing at his watch. They had to leave soon if they wanted to make it to the venue on time. Michelle gave him a quick, dismissive shrug, preoccupied with checking her makeup in a compact mirror. He was still in his room the last I saw, she murmured. With a sigh of impatience, Justin decided to head upstairs to Leo's room. He knocked, but there was no response. Just as he was about to turn away, he heard Leo's voice, muffled, from the other side of the door. Justin, is that you? I'll be down in a few minutes. Just finishing up in the shower. Justin rolled his eyes but couldn't resist the urge to check in on the room. So he opened the door, stepping inside. The room was cluttered, with clothes strewn around and the bed unmade, typical for Leo's laid-back, chaotic style. As Justin glanced around, something on the bed caught his eye, a flash of fabric that made his stomach tighten. There, in the middle of the bed, was a piece of delicate lace lingerie. Justin's heart skipped a beat as he stared at it, an uncomfortable familiarity creeping over him. It was exactly like the lingerie he'd bought for Michelle months ago. He picked it up, feeling a chill run down his spine as he ran his fingers over the fabric. The color, the style, it was unmistakable. But doubts gnawed at him. Maybe it's not hers, he told himself. Maybe it just looks similar. Yet deep down, a part of him knew the truth, even as he tried to deny it. He put the lingerie back on the bed, his mind swirling with suspicions he didn't want to believe. As he left Leo's room, the sense of betrayal was like a weight pressing down on him, but he shoved it aside, telling himself he couldn't afford to be distracted. They had a competition to win. The performance went off flawlessly. Every step, every beat, every movement was executed with a precision and passion that left the audience breathless. The team had never looked so united, so powerful, and when the judges announced them as the winners, the cheers from the crowd were deafening. In the dressing room afterward, they hugged each other, laughing, exhilarated. It was everything they had worked for, and the victory felt like validation of all their hard work. For a few hours, Justin managed to push his doubts aside, swept up in the joy and celebration of the win. That evening, they went to a bar near the venue to celebrate. Drinks were flowing and the energy was high as they toasted to their success. But as the night wore on, Justin couldn't help but notice how close Michelle and Leo had become over the past month. They stood next to each other at the bar, laughing, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that felt intimate. At one point, Justin watched as Leo leaned in, close to Michelle's ear, his hand resting casually on her thigh as he whispered something that made her smile. She glanced down, almost shyly, and for a brief moment, Justin saw something in her eyes. Something warm, something he hadn't seen directed at him in a long time. A pang of jealousy and anger surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Maybe it was just the drinks, he reasoned. They'd all been through so much together. Surely he was just imagining things. But then, a few minutes later, he noticed Michelle and Leo slipping away from the group, heading down the hallway toward the back of the bar. Justin's chest tightened as he watched them disappear, a sickening sense of dread settling in his stomach. He waited a few moments trying to tell himself it was nothing, but the suspicion gnawed at him, and before he knew it, he was following them, his heart pounding with every step. The hallway was dimly lit, leading to a series of private rooms and the restrooms. As Justin turned the corner, he froze, his worst fears confirmed. There, pressed against the wall, was Michelle, her arms wrapped around Leo as he held her close. She had one leg hooked around his hip, her body molded to his, their faces inches apart as they kissed with a passion that left no room for doubt. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even notice Justin standing there, watching, his heart shattering. With every second that passed, something inside him snapped. He stormed forward, his voice a low, furious growl. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Michelle and Leo broke apart, startled, but before either of them could react, Justin lunged at Leo, his fist swinging. The first punch landed squarely on Leo's jaw, sending him stumbling back. Leo recovered quickly, his face twisting in anger as he swung back, and soon they were grappling, both of them consumed by rage. "Justin, stop!" Michelle screamed, trying to pull them apart, but the fury between them was too intense. They wrestled, fists flying, each blow fueled by betrayal and heartbreak. The noise attracted the rest of the team, who rushed down the hallway, their faces filled with shock as they tried to break up the fight. Brandon and Joseph managed to pull Justin back, while Christian held on to Leo, keeping them apart. "What the hell is going on?" Brandon shouted, looking from Justin to Leo, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. But Justin didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Michelle, who stood there, disheveled and shaken, avoiding his gaze. The truth was written all over her face, and in that moment he felt a surge of anger, heartbreak, and humiliation like nothing he'd ever experienced. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the bar, leaving the team, the celebration, and the woman he thought he knew behind. The ride back to the hotel was silent and tense. Everyone was too shocked to speak, the weight of the betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Justin sat alone, staring out the window, feeling as though everything he'd built, his relationship, his trust, his place in the team had been ripped away in a single night. It's strange how betrayal can feel like a dull ache one minute and a knife to the gut the next. In the days after the fight, I felt like I was drifting through fog, a haze of anger and heartbreak, clouding everything. I'd left the team, moved out of the apartment I'd shared with Michelle, and was failing really, to focus on anything other than the gnawing pain of what had happened. But there was something about it that just didn't sit right with me, a sense that I still didn't fully understand what had gone down. Maybe it was denial. Maybe I just needed to believe there was more to this than my girlfriend choosing someone else right in front of me. Whatever it was, I started noticing things, little moments that didn't make sense, fragments of conversations that came back to me. Remembered the way Leo had acted around me, friendly, supportive, but always with this strange edge. Now that I thought about it, it was like he'd been watching, waiting for a moment to move in. One evening, as I was scrolling through old messages, I started picking up on a pattern in his texts to me. Leo had been dropping hints, subtle digs at my relationship with Michelle, questions about my commitment to the team, suggestions that maybe I wasn't as focused as I should be. It was so gradual, so sneaky, that I hadn't even noticed it at the time. But now, piecing it all together, I could see what he'd been doing. Leo had been planting seeds of doubt in everyone's mind, especially Michelle's. I needed to know more, so I started asking around, nothing too obvious, just a few casual questions to people in the team, old friends who knew us both. Turns out I wasn't the only one who'd noticed Leo's concern for me. He'd been saying things behind my back, framing it as if he was just trying to be helpful. You know, Justin seems distracted. He'd tell people, or I'm just worried Michelle's working too hard to hold things together on her own. Little comments designed to make him look like the caring teammate while slowly pulling us apart. The worst part was hearing from a friend who'd overheard him talking to Michelle one night after rehearsal. Apparently, he'd told her I didn't appreciate her enough, that I was holding her back. I could picture it so clearly. Leo, all concerned and sincere, telling her that she deserved better. I could feel the anger boiling inside me as it all came together. He'd seen a crack in our relationship, and he'd driven a wedge through it slowly and deliberately until he got exactly what he wanted. Couldn't let it end there. I had to talk to Michelle. I reached out to her, asking if we could meet. She sounded hesitant, but she agreed, and we arranged to meet at a small cafe, neutral ground. I didn't know exactly what I was expecting, but when I saw her, my heart twisted. She looked tired, almost haunted. The confident, magnetic woman I'd fallen for was gone, replaced by someone who looked just as broken as I felt. She was the first to speak. "Justin, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't look at me, her hands nervously twisting a napkin. "For everything. No, I messed up, and I don't even know what to say." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't going to be easy. "Michelle," I started, choosing my words carefully. "I know things got complicated between us, and I know I wasn't perfect, but I don't think what happened with Leo was just some random accident." Her brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. What do you mean? I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady. I think Leo wanted this to happen. I think he wanted to break us apart from the very beginning. For a moment, she just stared at me, disbelief written all over her face. Justin, what are you talking about? I told her everything I'd pieced together. The little digs Leo had made about me, the helpful advice he'd given her, how he'd subtly planted doubts between us. I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the messages he'd sent me, texts where he'd hinted that she seemed unhappy, that maybe she was under too much pressure. As I talked, I watched her expression change, shock giving way to realization. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't see it. I thought he was just being supportive. I thought he was there for me when you weren't. I felt a pang of guilt, even though I knew none of this was my fault. Michelle, I know I wasn't always there the way I should have been. But Leo, he saw that gap and took advantage of it. He wanted this. He wanted to be with you, and he used every opportunity he could to get closer. She looked away, her shoulders slumping as if a weight had settled on them. I'm so sorry, Justin, she said, her voice barely audible. I let myself get caught up in everything. In him. I should have seen it, but I didn't. We sat in silence for a while, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I could feel a strange sense of closure washing over me, like a wound that had finally stopped bleeding. The betrayal still hurt, but now I understood it wasn't just about her or me. There had been someone else in the shadows, pulling strings, widening the cracks in our relationship. Finally, I took a deep breath, breaking the silence. I didn't come here to make you feel worse. I needed you to know what really happened. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. Thank you for telling me. I don't know how I'll ever forgive myself for falling for it. I shrugged, feeling the weight lift just a little. We all make mistakes. Just learn from this. Don't let someone else manipulate you like that again. We parted ways that day, not as the couple we'd once been, but as two people who understood each other a little better. Whatever we'd had was over, and we both knew it. But at least we'd finally found the truth. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself. I joined a new dance team, one that valued integrity and teamwork, where everyone was open and supportive. I poured my energy into my craft, pushing myself to grow as a dancer and as a person. I heard through mutual friends that Michelle had cut ties with Leo completely. Felt strange, knowing he was out of her life just as quickly as he'd forced his way in, but I knew that was her decision to make. I couldn't let myself care anymore. Months later, at a dance showcase, I spotted her in the crowd. She looked stronger, happier, like she'd found her way back to herself. We exchanged a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything we'd been through. There was no bitterness left between us, only a quiet understanding. We'd both been hurt, both been fooled, but we'd come out on the other side. Take care, Michelle, I whispered to myself as she disappeared into the crowd, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. I'd moved on, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. Free from the shadows of betrayal, from the weight of the past, and ready to embrace whatever the future had in store.